New torch in for testing today. It's the M3 on the road. Although this came out last year, I was quite keen to review this one because it looked quite interesting. The sample was supplied via Gearbest, and we have two tints available, a cool or a warm white. I have the cool white version today. There's the seal on the box that you'll have to break, and then opening up the box. Inside we get the instruction manual. We'll have a look at that in a while. And you'll see the torch itself is in a neat little neoprene bag. It's actually not a bad little case at all. You could probably fit a spare battery in there as well. We'll come on to the torch again shortly when we go through the other items. In the front flap we have the other accessories that are included. Now you have a choice with this. You could just get the torch minus the charger and battery. I have the full pack, so you have spare O-rings. There is a wrist strap included. Quite a decent quality one. Has the adjuster as well. And it also has a bit of flex to it. And this is the 16340 cell. Rechargeable, rated at 700 milliamps. We're going to give that a test later on. We have the USA version on the power lead here, but it is a figure of 8 connector. And this is the charger. You can charge larger cells with this one, but some of the 18650s, the protected ones, are a bit tight. As it's a figure of 8, it is a universal connection, so it's quite easy to change the power cord or use the micro USB input. You don't get the cable with it, but they're very common and not much to see on the base of the charger. Now, unfortunately, the manual is all in Chinese, but there is a bit of information we can get out of this, including the weight, which is under 40 grams, and the length of around 7 centimeters. It does give us the output level at the top, but this varies from the figure that's on the website. Now, onto the torch itself. Does look very familiar, looks very much like an Olight torch, to be honest, and that's been said quite a few times in terms of the design and styling. This has a more matte finish to the case than some of the Olights that I've looked at, and we have that white button. Not a big fan of the white button there, but it's a fairly minor point to make. And looking at the top, we have the CREE XM-L2 U2 LED and a dimpled effect reflector. Build on this feels pretty good, actually, I have to say. The matte finish perhaps doesn't feel as nice as the Olight and not quite as dense. You can remove the clip as well if you wish. And onto the tail cap. This is already pre-greased, so it comes off quite nicely. Length on this is much closer to the S1R Baton 3. There's the magnet in the base cap. It's actually slightly longer than the S10R3. Now putting the cell in, you need to put positive terminal up with this, and the base cap quite strong with the magnetic force on that. I didn't have any problems with it sticking to magnetic objects. Now I'm going to compare it to the S1R Baton, which is a bit smaller. It's the premium torch, the Olight, and I've used that torch a lot. The reason for that is because the beam pattern on the S10R3 is much more of a normal torch, whereas the orange peel reflector will be closer to the Olight in terms of the light output. So I want to compare them both. This is a bit bigger on the M3, has to be said, in terms of length and diameter, but it's still pretty small. The Olight does have the advantage of that charging dock, as well as a few other advantages, but we're going to run them side by side. Anyway, you have the power levels 1 to 4. To turn it on, you have to push and hold for about half a second, and then just press through to change the power levels. You can access the turbo mode. Double press at any time takes you straight to that, even if the torch is off. And you have a triple press at any time, gives you quick access to the strobe modes. Again, even if the torch is off, and then you just single press to cycle through the 3 strobe modes that are included. Only thing you don't have access to is the ultra low power mode. And the button is quite stiff. That's the lockout function as such, that you need to press and hold it for a longer period of time to turn it on. And I didn't have any problems with it accidentally coming on. Just watch, if you double press, obviously it will come on into turbo. Now I did try the Olight cell in this, and this managed to power out at all power levels. We'll come on to the power level test later on. Going back to the original cell that's included, I'm going to run a capacity test on this cell as well, just to see how that does. Now with the charger, when you plug it in, I'm using the micro USB, you'll see the blue LEDs, and then it turns to red when it's charging. Charging rate is pretty much as I would expect, just over ½ amp, which is about perfect for this type of cell. You don't want a heavy charge. And when it's finished, the red LED turns to blue. So I'm testing the voltage on this termination, and it's a bit on the high side, about 4.25. I tested it with the mains lead as well. So there's a bit of improvement that could be done on that. It's not dangerous, but it's too high really for a termination charge, and for some reason it doesn't charge again in the charger, so it's just giving a longer charge for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure why it's not terminating as quickly as it should be. Now I put the cell in the S1R Baton, and that manages to power it at all power levels, so it is a high drain cell, it can handle that. Onto the capacity test, it came in pretty much bang on, exactly as it was on the label, which is unusual, and that's quite high for a cell of this size. Running through my standard test now, I put it in a glass of water for about ½ an hour, and there were no problems at all with any water penetration in the case. Now the torch ran for about 36 minutes starting off at turbo, and the voltage of the battery was 3.21 volts. It turned itself off, so it seems to have a sort of timer function where it will turn off if it's been left on for a long period of time. It gradually ramps down, and when you get the low battery warning, the white switch will flash red to let you know it's down to around about 10%. Now we're on the M3. This will give you the beam pattern. As you can see, quite a wide diffused beam, and I'm going to compare it directly to the S1R from Olight, and you can see there's a more diffused in the middle but larger area, but not quite as much spread on the sides. The lowest level on the ultra low for the M3 isn't that low compared to the Olight, which is probably around about a lumen real world. The S1R is much lower for the moonlight mode. That's one possible advantage. Now on the outside tests, on the road M3, and I move up through the power levels, and then double click, take it right up to the turbo mode. Now compare it with the S1R Baton. And moving up through the power levels again, you have two turbo modes with the S1R, one 600, which is what we're at now, and then you click again, you're up to the 900. Just out of interest, I decided to use the S1A Baton with a lithium cell, and that's the result I get at 600 lumens, so you can kind of compare the output. I'm more interested in the real world output on these torches to see how they are. Now outside, the first level you don't really see, but the next one is a fairly big jump up in terms of power. I perhaps would have preferred if they'd have had perhaps a lower level, maybe about 80 or 90 lumens. Anyway, we'll carry on taking the power levels right the way up. You see you get a very wide spread on this torch. That's due to the shallow reflector and the dimpled effect, the orange peel effect. And now I'm going to pair it directly to the S1R Baton, which has a more spread out, even spacing on the power levels. The beam output is actually a bit different on the Olight. I'll be able to show you some more shots later on where you'll see that. It seems to have more power in the central area, a little bit less spread than the M3. And we're starting off now with the M3. And we'll switch over to the Olight, which is have to kick it back up to the 900 lumens mark. And then back onto the M3. Now I've run a test at full power on the road, M3 first, highest level. Exactly the same position now. I've switched over to the S1R Baton, top turbo mode. So to my eyes the Olight is a bit more powerful. Quick close-up shot with the beam pattern. You see a big spread as you'd expect for a torch of this type, which is about ideal really. It doesn't have a huge range, but it lights up a wide area. And onto the telephoto tests. Test that I'm taking in the corner there, which I've done on all my videos. You can just compare the outputs. Some torches have a more spread out appearance, some a more concentrated one. Down the side of the house now with the M3. Cat was very interested in this torch, as he has been for the last few. We'll take it up through the power levels now. And up to the top setting. Now I've got the S1R Baton at the full power level, and again we'll compare it to the M3. Beam pattern is different, even though they're both quite wide. The Olight seems to push more power into the middle, whereas the M3 seems to spread it out a bit more on the edges. There's one disadvantage with the on the road, and that is the ultra low. It's not hugely bright and overbearing, but up close you don't really have a genuine moonlight mode, sort of like 1 or 2 lumens or even less. So that's perhaps not the ideal light for that particular activity. That's the only real disadvantage that I would say in terms of the spacing and power output would be with the torch. It really depends whether you use the moonlight mode, and I tend to a fair bit. It is low enough that it's not hugely bright, but that's my minor point to note. On the strobe modes now, you have the fairly fast flashing. Then there's a beacon. And then we move on to the SOS. Nice that you have the 3 strobe modes there. Don't know if you're going to use them all, but they're kept out of the way so you won't accidentally activate them. Now onto the outside shot, just to show you some of the spread with the torch. Nice wide spread there, but it's also got a reasonable amount of power, at least in the top settings, where you can hit further distances with the torch if you need to. So I can see the top of the roof, no problem. Couple of thoughts on the M3. Been using this for a while now. What I will say is I would have perhaps gone with a slightly different design, perhaps come up with something a bit more interesting and unique, leaving that to one side. The torch is actually good in most ways. There are some compromises. I wouldn't make a decision about these torches in terms of the power output because there isn't that much between them. The S1R is a bit more powerful to my eyes, but I don't think there's going to be anyone unhappy with the power output of this torch. Plenty of power there and a nice beam pattern too. On to the negatives. The charger does need to terminate a bit lower because that could reduce your recharge cycles on the battery, but I would still consider the battery and charger pack because the cell is a good capacity, quite a bit above average for most of these cells that I've tested. The other point that I would change would be the spacing, a little bit on the bottom end, maybe a smaller step from ultra low to low. Perhaps the biggest downer for me is the lack of moonlight mode. I use that quite a lot on the torches that I have, and you don't have that on this one, so that is a compromise. It's not overbearing at low power levels, but you don't have a genuine moonlight or firefly mode. On the flip side, price performance can't be argued with. Also get decent build quality, choice of 3 strobe modes, and a nice bundle as well, strap and case and spare O-rings. So value for money wise, quite a strong offering. So thanks for watching this. I hope you found it useful if you were considering this model. Don't forget to subscribe if you are interested in torches, and I will see you in the next video.